Saram everyone, my name is Sairupa and I'd like to warmly welcome each and every one of you to today's Choose Your Own speaker session on the topic how to best obtain unity of thought, word and deed. We like to warmly welcome Brother Amitabh Das Gupta, who joins us from Melbourne in Victoria. Brother Amitabh works as a director at KPMG Australia. He also plays an active member in the organisation as the devotional coordinator at Springwell Centre and as the Victorian Young Adult Advisor. Brother Amitabh had the divine fortune of being one of Swami's students at his institutions and was provided the opportunity to serve in Prashanthi Nilayam. Without further ado, I'd like to call upon Brother Amitabh. Thank you.
Om Shri Sai Ram. My humble pranams at Bhagwan's lotus feet, respected elders and my dear sisters and brothers. The theme of my talk today is how to get unity of thought, word and deed. During my stay with Bhagwan, one of the things I noticed the difference between God and the world, the difference between how God looks at us and how the world looks at us were total two opposites. The world always looked at us based on our actions and based on our words. But I found Swami, God, really looking at us based on the thought behind the word, the thought behind the action, or the intention behind that action. I remember one evening when I was a college student, I was seated in the bhajan hall and Swami was giving darshan outside. And there were very few boys in the bhajan hall, so that when Swami finishes his darshan and gets inside the interview room, he could just look at few of us over there. And that was a chance, a privilege we really were seeking. And that day in the bhajan hall, there were around 15-20 boys. And then we had, in the ladies' side, there was just 2 or 3 women there. And the rest of the bhajan hall was empty. Swami finished his round, and as he was about to enter inside the interview room, he suddenly said, "Boys, give me way." And he entered the bhajan hall and walked past me. There was someone holding a card. Swami just brushed him aside, and Swami went straight, taking a beeline to a very old lady. And Swami went and stood in front of her and said, "Amma, or mother, here I am for you." And this lady was not able to understand what was happening. And again Swami said, "Amma, I am here." And again this lady couldn't respond. And then Swami asked another lady who was seated beside her to tell her that I have come only for her. And this lady told her, "Swami is standing in front of you. Swami wants to talk to you." And still this lady did not understand what was happening. And then as Swami was about to leave, suddenly something happened. This lady cried out, "Swami, Swami," and tears started streaming down her cheeks, the tears of joy. And she tried to catch hold of Swami, and I could see Swami's face. Swami was full of joy and bliss. It was like 1,000 sun. That was the brightness in Swami's face. And then Swami blessed her. And then as Swami was returning our way, Swami said, "You know, that lady is blind. She cannot see. But she has so much of purity of her bhakti and devotion and yearning for me that I can come anywhere for her. And there was this, she was old, full white hair, and was not a VIP, was just another lady just seated somewhere. And Swami gave her so much of attention, and she got Swami. And we could see the feeling on Swami's face. And then Swami looked at the boy beside me who was holding the card. And I think the card had something like, I love you. And we all represented that card as boys. And we were asking Swami for something. Swami looked at it and said, boys, you all exhibition. You all just do drama. There is no feeling. And Swami just brushed aside that card and he walked away. Now this incident, why is it so relevant in today's topic? Unity of thought, word and deed. In one side, you had us. We had the boys who had written this beautiful, amazingly crafted, massive card saying, I love you, Swami, getting up and showing, and Swami not even bothering about it. And at the other end, you had this old lady who didn't have anything, who had no means. She couldn't see Swami. And the Lord going straight to her because the feelings she had for Swami and the yearning she had for Swami inside, communication, word and the deed and the tears streaming down her face, she gained the Lord. Whereas we didn't have that intention, we didn't have the thought behind, we just had the word and action, and we lost the Lord and the Lord walked away. So how can we have the Lord for us, for all of us? How can He not go away? How can He come to you like this old woman who was praying and yearning for Swami? And that day Swami told us, it is just the purity of your thought, the intensity of your craving. And what I have realized is, for me, one of the most important things and the easiest way is the path of Shravanam. Listening to the stories of the Lord, listening to the glory of the Lord, listening to some of Swami's stories chokes you, and you yearn and you pine to be in that situation, and you crave for Him. And that desire turning into a card and an action really pleases Swami, and Swami will come running to you. That's what he said. And even if you look at the great Emperor Parikshit from the Bhagavatam, he knew he had 7 days to live. Right? Nowadays, we do not know how many days we will live because of the pandemic. He knew he just had 7 days to live. And what did he do? He left everything and just started listening to the Lord's stories. And in 7 days, he merged into Krishna. Now let's take a second instance where you have your thought and your deed synchronized, but your word is different. And Swami gives this beautiful story of little Dhruva. Dhruva was 5 years old, and he was the son of Uttamapada and his first wife, Suniti. But Suniti was not the king's favorite wife. The king had another wife called Sarichi, who was his favorite. And they had another son called Uttama, who was 4 years old. One day, Dhruva and Uttama were playing in the garden. And the emperor Uttamapada walks in and he's observing them seated. And suddenly Uttama, the younger one, gets tired and he goes and sits on his father's lap. Now Dhruva, a 5-year-old, sees this, and he also leaves everything and goes and sits on father's another lap. And father, the emperor, is caressing both his children. And suddenly the queen, the favorite queen, Sirichi, observes this. And she goes running and takes hold of Dhruva and throws him away and says, "How dare you sit on the king's lap? Only children from my womb can sit on the king's lap." And Dhruva is insulted. This 5-year-old boy is insulted and he's crying. Tears are streaming down his eyes. And he goes to his mother. And his mother tells him, "Only Narayana is your refuge. Because only the son from her womb, from Sirichi's womb, can sit on the king's lap and can become the next king. So go to the forest and pray to Narayana and he will bless you." Now, little Dhruva, imagine 5 years old, a very little tender boy, doesn't know what a forest is, been brought up in a kingdom like a prince, doesn't know who Narayana is. And he goes into the forest and he's walking and walking, and suddenly there comes sage Narada. And Narada tells him, "Boy, where are you going into the forest to play?" And Dhruva says, "I'm going to seek Narayana because I have promised my mother that I will win the grace of Narayana and sit on my father's lap." And Narayana looks at him and said, "Are you crazy? People have meditated for hundreds and 200s of years and couldn't get the darshan of Narayana, and you are a 5-year-old boy. How do you think Narayana will even listen to you or come to you? And if you go to the forest, there's this forest infested with animals, wild animals, and snakes, scorpions, and at night infested with evil spirits. And you're just a boy, 5-year-old boy. Don't go there." Dhruva is determined and he says, "Oh sage, I have promised my mother and I have taken this vow to get the grace of Narayana. I have to go." Finally, Narada heart melts and he says, "Okay, just chant Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya and have the Lord's image in your mind and in your heart. And keep chanting and the Lord will appear." And Prahlada goes into this thick, dense forest. In the first month, he starts chanting Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And he just has fruits for the first month and Narayana doesn't come. The second month, Dhruva again keeps chanting, visualizing the form of the beautiful Narayana. And nothing happens. This time, he gives up eating and he just is on water. And the fourth month, he gives up even water. Now he's just on air. He's not drinking. He's not eating. He's become frail. And finally, the Lord notices. Narayana notices. And in the 5th month, Narayana appears in front of Dhruva and says, "Child, what do you want?" And Dhruva opens his eyes and seeing this majestic form of the Lord, he gets all his energies back. And then he tells, "Oh Lord, when you know why I came to the forest, when you know where I am, and when you know whom I'm praying to, don't you also know what I want?" And Swami, in his beautiful way, in his discourse, says, but Narayana had read 2 more spiritual books than Dhruva, and immediately Narayana said, you know, Prahlada, the reason I want to know from your own lips is because you came into the forest with a thought of sitting on your father's lap. That was the thought. And you immediately put it into action. Now I want to see whether there is unity of word, thought, word and deed. And what will you ask? And then Dhruva understood, and immediately looking at this beautiful smile and the lotus-like eyes of Narayana said, "O Lord, when I have seen you, when I have seen your majesty and glory, why should I seek just a temporary position to sit on my father's lap? When I have got the nectar in you, why should I seek just little drops of water? When I have got you, the diamond, why should I just look at a few glasses that is signifying sitting on my father's lap? All I want, Lord, is you and you alone." And there the beautiful Lord looked at Dhruva and said, "Dhruva, there is no unity of thought, word and deed. You thought of getting your father's lap, sitting on your father's lap, but your word is you want me, and your action was again, you came to the forest only to win, to sit on your father's lap. So you have to go back and you will get what you thought and what your deed was, because that is in majority." And then Dhruva looked at the Lord and he knew that he couldn't say anything. And he says, "Lord, my only prayer is I surrender to you. Whatever you say, I will do." And the Lord was so happy. And he said, "Yes, just follow whatever I tell you and surrender to me. Till today you were listening only to your mother and father, but today I am your mother and father. Just follow me. Go back. You will become the emperor, you will rule, and then you will come back to me. And I will give you an exalted position." And the North Star, which is the pinnacle of all stars, with the Saptarishis of the sages, the pole star, that will be named after you. That is the Dhruva star. And for eternity, people will know your devotion to me. With that, Dhruva goes back. His father repents and says, "You had the darshan of Narayana. You should become the emperor." And his stepmother is also repentant, and the king and his two wives leave for the forest to do penance to get the darshan of Narayana, and Dhruva becomes the emperor. And he rules for many years, and then he merges into Lord Vishnu. And Swami said, just see, what did he do? All that he did was he just obeyed the command of the Lord. And because he obeyed the command of the Lord, he got the greatest of grace of the Lord, that surrender which he did. I remember when I had just finished my MBA and I was waiting to get instructions from Swami. Suddenly Swami called me one day. After writing so many letters to him, he said, "Boy, what do you want?" And this was in Swami's inner interview room. And it was only me and Swami. And I said, "Swami, whatever you say, I will do." And he said, "Boy, you tell me what you want to do." I said, "No, Swami, whatever you say, I will do." And then Swami looked at me and said, "Okay, I'm going. I called you only to know what you want to do, but if you don't tell me, then you're wasting my time." And then Swami got up to go, and immediately I caught hold of Swami's feet and said, "Swami, I'll tell you what I want." I said, "Swami, I want to do a PhD." And then Swami was so happy, and Swami sat down, and for next 10-15 minutes he just explained to me about PhD, who should be my guide, what should be the topic, and he said go and meet the registrar and then go to the college and meet your guide. And I was so elated, and I finished the interview and I came and I was boosting with my ego that Swami talked to me, gave an interview, and I went, and I was so happy. And the evening when I came back and sat almost levitating, I got a cold shoulder. Swami didn't even look at me. I thought maybe Swami is busy. Next morning again, Swami didn't look at me. And when I went and spoke to the registrar, he said, don't go to the college. Swami is very upset with you. And I said, sir, Swami was so happy. And I recounted the entire incident, what happened in the interview room. Oh, and then he heard that and he said, Babu, Swami tricked you. He wanted to know what was deep inside you, what was deep inside your thoughts, deep inside your heart, what you wanted. The word, what you were saying, that Swami, whatever you want me to do, was that genuine or not? But it wasn't. He played the drama and you fell for it, and the truth came out that you wanted something else, but you were telling something else. Swami wanted to give you a job in the airport, and now you wanted research. Then I realized there was no unity of thought, word and deed. I wanted something, but my word, my action was something else. And Swami really looked at the intention. And I was in almost cold storage for next 2-3 months. And suddenly after that, Swami, to cut the long story short, Swami again asked me, what do you want this time? And again, there were two choices, whether I want to go home or whether I want a job in Puttaparthi. And this time I said, I don't know, Swami, whatever you say, I will do. I was just silent. I was quiet. I didn't say I want to go home. I didn't want research. I didn't want job. I just looked at him and I was silent. And he asked me 7-8 times. This time I kept quiet. And inside I was praying, Swami, you tell me. And Swami turned at me, looked at me and smiled and said, do this job in Puttaparthi. And I was very fortunate to work almost for 6 years in Prashanti Nilayam, serving Bhagwan. And the only thing I realized was I surrendered my will to him. I removed that dichotomy of having my thoughts somewhere and my action and deed somewhere. So this aspect is the easiest way, is one of the other 9 parts of devotion, is Atma Nivedan, more surrender, the highest thing which Dhruva did. And he listened to the Lord. And then there was this unity of thought, word and deed. There was a big lesson for me. Surrender to the Lord. The third part is some of the very practical things which can happen to anyone in your day-to-day life in terms of unity of thought, word and deed. I remember there was a senior of mine in college in Vrindavan, and one day he just got up and asked Swami, Swami, I'm having bad thoughts. What do I do, Swami? And Swami looked at him, smiled and just brushed him aside and said, rainy season, it will rain. Just passing clouds, it'll go. Just don't act on it, right? Simple, practical exercise, right? Don't act on it. Just observe it and let it go. Or just make yourself busy in something else, right? And that was Swami's simple, beautiful exercise. Or another thing which usually happens in our life, and at least especially just happened to me so many times, is we think something else and something else comes out from our mouth. Especially at work, especially if you're speaking to a boss, your boss, or some very senior people, and you wanted to say something, but something else comes out, isn't it? And that's happened to me so many times. And one of the advice I got, and from staying with Swami or experiencing Bhagwan, was just silence your thoughts. When we have too many thoughts in mind, too many thoughts in mind, this is what happens. We think something and something else comes out. So to try to silence your thoughts, take deep breaths. Swami says, so hum, so hum. Regularly practice that. Chant his name all the time, right? All the time. And the most important thing is practice, practice, practice. If you have to sing, if you have to speak, if you have to do anything, practice. Practice it 5 times, practice it 6 times, practice it 10 times. Right? I saw a very charismatic speaker, and he was speaking so well, and it was so natural, and everyone went and said it's so natural. And you know what he said? He said, I practiced it 10 times, and that is why it is so natural to you. Right? So that practice is so important, and Swami emphasized practice in bhajans. Right? At least 5 to 10 times practice that bhajan. Get into it. Get into that feeling and then sing or then speak. Then you have that unity of thought, word and deed. And then that full charisma comes out. One of the things of charisma, and we've seen that we all want to be that charismatic person, right? That when he enters the room, everyone looks at you, and when people listen to you. And Swami was that, right? And one of the things I found with charismatic people is that they are intensely focused on the moment. When they're talking to you, they are totally focused. Their thought is not somewhere. They're not twiddling with their phones or thinking of something else. When they're talking or when they're doing something, they're just doing that. They're giving it 100%. They are so connected, and it is all because it's all because they have just practiced that for a very, very long time. I have this beautiful, I came across this beautiful quote on training and practice is, we don't raise to the level of our expectations. We don't raise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training. We fall to the level of our training. How much we practiced, that is where we will land up to. And Swami emphasized that as well. And another thing I'll just end with is as part of your day-to-day life, everyone is looking for confidence. People look for confident leaders, how you articulate yourself, how you command respect. So that confidence is very, very important. And one of the definitions of confidence, which I came across and which I really loved, was confidence is purity of action produced by a mind free of doubt. I'll repeat it again. Confidence is purity of action produced by a mind free of doubt. So you see that where the unity of thought, word and deed comes in, it's in our mental life, it's in our spiritual life, and it's in our day-to-day life, right? And with this, I would just like to summarize, how do we put unity of thought, word and deed in practice? How do we have that? The first thing, what we really looked at was the example of this old lady, and she got God. Whereas the students and we lost Swami. And the only reason was our thoughts were not pure. Our intentions were not right. And the easiest way was Shravanam. Think of the Lord. Hear his stories. Hear his glory. Number 2, we talked about was the story of Dhruva. Right? His thoughts and his deeds were in sync, but his words were something else. And because of that, he lost the Lord again. How did he get the Lord back? By surrendering everything to the Lord, by listening to the Lord, by following the Lord, which is Atmanivedana. And yes, and some of the very practical things, what Swami used to tell us, is practice, practice, practice. Then you get that muscle memory. Then there is unity of thought, word and deed. And with this, I offer this particular talk at Bhagwan's lotus feet and pray that he blesses all of us to have the unity of thought, word, and deed in our daily lives till the end of our lives. Jai Sai Ram.
Thank you, Brother Amitabh, for your wonderful speech and for transporting us all back to Prashanthi Nilayam with your wonderful experiences. You really made this big topic very easy to digest with 3 simple steps, which is purifying our mind with constantly remembering the divine form, having firm faith in our Lord, and finally putting it all into practice. And I really love the way you tied this topic of unity of thought, word, and deed back to the concept of self-confidence, which is, of course, confidence in the higher self. If it's okay with you, we'd love to have the opportunity to ask you a few questions.
Sure.
The first question we have is an interesting one. It comes as Swami says, the unity of thought, words, and action is mankind. It demonstrates humanness. But Hitler also had unity of thought, word, and deed. How does this reconcile with Swami's teachings? A bit of a curly one there.
That's a great question. And if you look at what Swami emphasized, he emphasized purity of thought. That was very, very important. And if you recollect the story I mentioned in my speech, which was about the college student who asked Swami, I have a bad thought, what do I do? And Swami didn't say, okay, have unity of thought, word, and deed, and implement it, right? All that Swami said was, okay, you have a bad thought, it's a rainy season, okay, it will rain, but don't act on it, right? So Swami emphasized on the purity of your thought. Whereas if you look at Hitler, right, was his thoughts, words, and action pure, right? Did it originate from love? Did it originate from truth, right? It harmed people. Millions of people died and millions of people suffered, and everything came out of its ego. It was not from love. It was not from truth. Okay? It was not from compassion, right? And that is where that purity of the thought was not there. And because there's no purity of thought, it is very, very dangerous to put that thought into action. So what Hitler didn't actually reconcile with Swami's teachings of unity of thought, word, and deed, but the thought needs to come from purity, and everything needs to be in purity. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. And it really reminds us that we must get the basics right, the basics of the Swami's 5 human values. Our second question that we have for you comes from an audience member. I have great thoughts and ideas. I speak great things. However, I'm unable to act on this. I procrastinate. What do I do?
Wonderful, wonderful question. I remember once Swami, when I was studying in Prashanthi Nilayam, Swami had called us, those boys who were studying or who were working in the ashram, and I was working in the ashram, into the interview room one morning suddenly, and we sat around him, and this particular instruction or advice really is very strong in my mind, and it rings a lot of bells, even till today, even though it was 20 years ago. Swami said, if you have a good thought, implement it or do it immediately. Whereas if you have a bad thought, just postpone it, right? And your mind will not act on it because you just postpone it. Your mind immediately, the nature of the mind is it immediately wants to act on bad thoughts, and it wants to always push back the good thoughts and don't act on it. But Swami's advice to us boys at that point in time was, if it is a good thought, implement it immediately, okay? If it is a bad thought, just postpone it. So that was one tip which I I think is very, very relevant, that if you have a great thought and if you're really speaking good things, immediately put that good thing into action. And when all of these three actually come together, then it's actually unity of thought, word, and deed. The second thing is also when you emphasize on yourself that, oh, I am not doing it, right? I am thinking great thoughts. I am talking great, but I am not doing it. You're again coming from that egocentricity, as per Swami, where you don't identify yourself with Swami, right? And one of the things Swami told me once I asked Swami, I was a school student, and I told Swami, and it was our national examinations of our 12th grade back in India. And I asked Swami, I just sleep, like I play a lot, I want to study. And that was such a simple, but yet very profound teaching, when the Lord tells you, offer your actions to me, then your actions become perfect. And that's what Lord Krishna told Arjuna in the Gita as well. If your actions has to be perfect, offer it to me. And when you say you're offering those actions to Swami, that means you're telling yourself that you are not the doer and Swami is the doer. You're acting with that thought in mind. Okay, so that procrastination is not about you. The focus and stress is not about you. It is about the Lord. He is the doer and he will work through you. And the third thing, which I feel is also very, very important, is we need to think back and be aware of what would be the repercussions of us. Like, okay, I'm thinking good thoughts, I'm speaking well, but I'm not enacting it, right? And that is, if you look at your day-to-day activities in your professional life, that's the first red flag of not having trust. You tell someone with good intention, you have good intention, but when it comes to delivery, when that work needs to be completed, you're not doing it, right? What will happen? There'll be a breach of trust, and you may lose your face in front of peers. You may not get work in future. You may not get promoted. It's like all the things which a natural human being wants to grow, right? You don't really get that because you're saying something, but you're doing something else. So that is also very important. And also even in your family, right? If you're having little children, they will never do what you tell them. They will always do what they see you doing, right? And that's the mark of whether a good parent or a good father. So or even a good leader. So it is that doing which is very important, but it needs to be aligned to the purity of your thought, purity of your deed, and then you act it. So those three, when it's in unity, when that action comes out, and when you know that, yes, there are going to be repercussions if I'm not enacting it, when you know that you're dedicating it to the Lord, when you're dedicating it to Swami, right? That is those three things, and doing it immediately when a good thought comes, I think will help you to get away from procrastination.
Thank you, Brother Amitabh, for answering that question. It certainly reminds us to never hesitate to do a good deed. And if you don't mind, we do have one last question for you. In your experience in Prashanthi Nilayam, can you please share with us on how you witnessed Swami foster a culture of unity?
That's a very pertinent question, specifically in the times we live, where the world is divided based on gender inequality, based on political affiliations, based on religion, which is a massive thing, divided based on color of your skin or your race. And if you looked at Prashanthi Nilayam Puttaparthi, it was international, which was really, really fascinating. You had people from Africa, from people from India, people from South America, people from the US, and all across the world, just sitting together, shoulder to shoulder. And because all of them were brought together because of the teachings and the vision and the purpose of Swami, of what he gave to every one of them to really understand and find out who we really are. And what we are is not just the body, but there is much more than that. And finding that real purpose of who we are united everyone to really come to Swami, and the way his teachings really brought everyone together, right? One of his beautiful teachings was, there is only one religion, the religion of love. There is only one caste, the caste. Swami used to say, every bhajan session, you need to have a Sarva Dharma bhajan. That means a bhajan which encompasses all gods, all religions, whether it is Allah, whether it is Christianity, or whether it is any god. There should be one Sarva Dharma bhajans which unites people, right? There was and also he used to say, okay, you need to have different gods bhajan. Don't have just Swami's bhajan. Have a Rama bhajan, have a Krishna bhajan, have a Devi bhajan, so that many people in the crowd, as part of the devotees, everyone have their own personal inclinations. And finally, there is only one God, Swami used to say, and he is omnipresent. That was his universal message of love all, serve all. He didn't say, okay, love only him, love only them, don't love this guy, don't love that guy. It was like universality of religions, universality of everything. And I also remember, like, there used to be so many Indian politicians visiting him, whether it is the prime ministers, whether it's presidents, and it was a ruling party and also the opposition party, right? Both used to come, and Swami used to give both of them audience. And no one knew whom Swami was actually supporting, and he was so apolitical compared to what is actually happening in the world today. And we had like one of the Muslim ministers of Kashmir, Farooq Abdullah, who was from Kashmir, he coming and getting an audience from Bhagwan, from Swami, and Swami lovingly receiving him. And when Swami had gone to Kashmir, Swami had even met his father, and they revered Swami, right? And everyone, no one felt that Swami discriminated against anyone, whether it is the foreigners or whether it is women. Like, women were taught the same things, right? What we are talking about, gender equality, like Swami emphasized it from the beginning, right? He gave so much importance to women in terms of Vedas, Gayatri Mantra. His first educational institute was actually for women, okay, and it was not boys, okay. So he just brought everyone together, and that was the beautiful quality of a leader, that you bring everyone together for a higher purpose, for a higher vision. And that vision was love for God, the devotion to Swami. It, like, he was not for only people who were very intellectual, right? It was never for those people only who had devotion, or he was never there for only those people who went and served, right? He was there for people who had devotion. He gave them attention. Who served, he gave them attention. Who sang bhajans, he gave them attention. Who spoke wonderfully, he gave them attention. Okay, and who were in the Jnana Marga, he gave them attention. And like, he was never that, okay, I'm just taking one sect of people and that's my core competency, right? He was like the divine parent. Like, if I'm a parent, if I have 3 kids, and if I'm a good parent, I will never show speciality to anyone. I will always unite everyone. I will give everyone equal attention, and I know what they need. And that was what Swami was. And that was what from where he came. So you could never say, "Oh, Swami tried to divide people and he was not united." I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you very much. And thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights and your thoughts today.